He swore he had never seen her before, but the silver medallion in Kaya's hand and the 7-year-old boy waiting at home told a different story. She had not crossed 3 days of hostile territory to let him escape the truth again. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The Arizona sun hung low over the Dragoon Mountains, casting long shadows across the weathered trading post that marked the boundary between two worlds. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of tobacco and leather, and conversations died the moment she appeared in the doorway. Kaya had not set foot in a white man's settlement in 7 years, not since the night she had sworn never to look for him again. But promises made in grief have a way of breaking themselves when the truth demands its reckoning. She stood there in the entrance, her presence commanding attention despite the hostile stares from the half-dozen men scattered around the room. Her buckskin dress was adorned with intricate turquoise beadwork that had taken her grandmother 3 winters to complete, and the bone choker around her neck marked her as a woman of standing among her people. At 28 summers, Kaya carried herself with the dignity of someone who had survived losses that would have broken weaker spirits. The man she sought sat at a corner table, his back to the wall, in the manner of someone who had made enough enemies to warrant constant vigilance. Even from across the room, she recognized the set of his shoulders, the way his weathered hands wrapped around his cup of coffee. Time had carved deeper lines into his face, and his dark hair now showed traces of silver at the temples, but there was no mistaking Caleb Thornton. He was the man who had ridden into her life like a summer storm and left devastation in his wake. Their eyes met across the dusty room, and Kaya watched something flicker in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or maybe just the wariness of a man confronted by a ghost from his past. She had imagined this moment countless times during the long nights when sleep refused to come, when the weight of her secret pressed against her chest like a stone. Now that it was finally here, she found her voice steady, her purpose clear. She crossed the room with deliberate steps, aware of every whisper and shifting boot that followed her progress. The proprietor, a heavy-set man with suspicious eyes, moved as if to intercept her, but something in her bearing made him think better of it. She stopped in front of Caleb's table and looked down at him with an expression that could have been carved from the red rock canyons of her homeland. His voice was rough when he finally spoke, as if the words had to be dragged from somewhere deep and reluctant. "Ma'am, I think you've got me confused with someone else. I don't believe we've met." The lie hung between them like smoke from a dead fire. Kaya felt the familiar anger rise in her chest, the fury that had sustained her through years of hardship and heartbreak. But she had not traveled 3 days through hostile territory to let anger speak for her. She had come with proof, and proof was what she would give him. Without a word, she reached into the pouch at her hip and withdrew the object that had burned against her skin for 7 long years. It was a silver medallion, tarnished now but still bearing the distinctive engraving that no man could mistake. The image showed a rising sun over mountains, with initials intertwined at its center. She held it up between them, watching his face drain of color as recognition crashed over him like a wave against rocks. "Where did you get that?" His voice was barely a whisper now, stripped of its earlier pretense. "That belonged to my mother. It was her wedding gift from my father." Kaya felt a grim satisfaction at his reaction, but she kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that showing emotion to men like this only gave them weapons to use against you. "You gave it to me," she said quietly, "on the night you promised to return. The night before you rode away and never looked back." The other patrons had gone silent now, their attention fixed on the confrontation unfolding before them. Kaya was aware of their stares, their judgment, but she had stopped caring about the opinions of strangers long ago. What mattered was the man in front of her, and the truth he had tried to bury beneath years of silence and distance. Caleb's hand trembled as he reached for the medallion, but Kaya pulled it back, keeping it just out of his grasp. "You don't get to touch this," she said. "Not until you acknowledge what it means. Not until you admit what you left behind when you disappeared." "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice cracked on the words, betraying the lie. You have to understand, things were different then. The territories were at war. I couldn't stay without putting you in danger." Kaya laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Danger? You want to speak to me of danger? Do you have any idea what I faced after you left? What we faced?" The emphasis on that final word made him flinch, as if she had struck him. "We? What do you mean, we?" For a moment, Kaya considered letting him suffer in uncertainty a while longer. He deserved that much and more for the pain he had caused. But she had not come here for revenge. She had come for recognition, for acknowledgement of a truth that could no longer remain hidden. "Your son," she said, and watched the words hit him like bullets. "The son you left growing in my belly when you rode away 7 years ago. The boy who has your eyes and your stubborn chin, and who asks every day why his father never came for him." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the creak of floorboards as someone shifted uncomfortably nearby. Caleb stared at her with an expression that shifted from disbelief to horror to something that might have been hope, all in the space of a heartbeat. "A son. I have a son." "You have a son who believes his father is dead," Kaya replied, because that was easier than telling him the truth. That his father chose to forget us, that the promises whispered in the darkness meant nothing when the sun rose and the world demanded its due. She could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the desperate search for some way to escape the net closing around him. But there was no escape from the medallion in her hand, from the proof she carried that connected their lives in ways he could never deny. Whatever he had told himself over the years, whatever justifications he had built to ease his conscience, they were crumbling now like adobe walls in a flash flood. "I never knew," he said finally. "I swear to you, I never knew. If I had, I would have come back. I would have found a way. Would you?" Kaya's voice was ice. "The man I knew would have sent word, would have asked after me, would have done something more than vanish like morning mist. Instead, I heard nothing. 7 years of silence while I raised your child alone, while my people whispered about the woman who had been abandoned by her white lover." The shame in his expression was real, she could see that much. But shame was not enough to balance the scales of what he had done. Shame did not feed a hungry child or comfort a boy crying in the night for a father who was never coming. Shame was just another form of selfishness, a way of making his guilt about himself rather than the people he had wronged. "What do you want from me?" he asked, and for the first time Kaya heard something genuine in his voice. "Whatever it is, I'll do it. Just tell me what you need." She studied him for a long moment, this man who had once made her believe that love could bridge the chasm between their worlds. He was older now, worn down by years of hard living and harder choices. But somewhere beneath the weathered exterior, she could still see traces of the man who had held her beneath the stars and spoken of futures they would never share. "I want you to come with me," she said at last. "I want you to meet your son and let him decide for himself what kind of man his father is. After that, whatever happens is between you and him, but he deserves the chance to know the truth, even if the truth is painful." Caleb was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the medallion that still hung from her fingers like a condemnation and a promise. Then slowly he nodded, and something shifted in the air between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first tentative step towards something that might one day become understanding. The journey ahead would be long and uncertain, fraught with dangers both physical and emotional. But as Kaya turned toward the door, she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in 7 years. Hope, fragile and unexpected, blooming in the wasteland of her carefully guarded heart. They rode out at dawn when the desert air still carried the coolness of night, and the first rays of sunlight painted the mesas in shades of gold and crimson. Kaya led the way on her painted mare, a horse she had raised from a foal and trained in the manner of her people. Behind her, Caleb followed on his buckskin gelding, maintaining a respectful distance that spoke of his uncertainty about where he stood with her. The trail wound through canyon country, following paths that had been used by her ancestors for generations beyond counting. Every rock formation, every twisted juniper held meaning for Kaya, memories of journeys taken with her grandmother, and the stories told around campfires that had shaped her understanding of the world. This land was part of her in ways that Caleb could never fully comprehend, no matter how many years he spent in the territory. They traveled in silence for the first several hours, each lost in their own thoughts. Kaya found herself remembering the first time she had seen him, 8 summers ago, when he had stumbled into her village, half dead from thirst and exposure. He had been fleeing something, though he never told her what, and her people had taken him in against the advice of the elders, who warned that white men brought nothing but trouble. She had been the one assigned to tend his wounds and bring him back to health. 20 years old and full of curiosity about the world beyond her valley, she had found herself drawn to this stranger with the haunted eyes and the gentle hands. He spoke to her differently than the other white men she had encountered, treating her as an equal rather than a curiosity or a conquest. By the time he was well enough to leave, she had given him something she could never take back. Those memories felt like they belonged to another woman now, someone young and naive who believed that love could transcend the boundaries that history had drawn between their peoples. The woman she had become knew better. She understood that the world was not kind to those who dared to cross such lines, that there were consequences for defying the order that men had imposed upon the land. They stopped at midday beside a spring that bubbled up from the red rock, creating a small oasis of green in the otherwise barren landscape. Kaya watered the horses while Caleb sat on a boulder nearby, his hat pulled low against the sun. She could feel his eyes on her as she worked, could sense the questions building behind his silence like thunderclouds on the horizon. "Tell me about him," he said finally. "Our son, what is he like?" Kaya straightened and turned to face him, weighing how much she was willing to share. The boy was her treasure, the one good thing that had come from the wreckage of her youthful dreams. Speaking of him to this man who had abandoned them both felt like offering up something sacred to someone who had not earned the right to receive it. "His name is Nantan," she said after a long pause. "It means speaker in our language. I gave him that name because from the moment he could form words, he has never stopped asking questions about everything he sees. He wants to understand how the world works, why things are the way they are." Caleb's expression softened at this, and Kaya saw something that might have been pride flicker in his eyes. "Does he know about me? Does he know I'm white?" "He knows his father was a man from beyond the mountains," Kaya replied carefully. "He knows that you loved me once, or at least that is what I told him. Whether that was true or not, I wanted him to believe he came from something more than just a moment of weakness." The words landed like stones, and she watched Caleb flinch at the implication. "It wasn't weakness," he said quietly. "What we had was real. I know you don't believe that anymore, but I need you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. Not one day has passed that I haven't wondered what became of you." Kaya felt the old anger stir in her chest, but she forced it down. They had 3 more days of travel ahead of them, and she could not afford to let emotion cloud her judgment. "Pretty words," she said, "but words are easy. Actions are what reveal a man's true nature, and your actions told me everything I needed to know." She turned back to the horses, signaling that the conversation was over for now. They had ground to cover, and the longer they lingered in the open, the greater the risk. She turned back to the horses, signaling that the conversation was over for now. They had ground to cover, and the longer they lingered in the open, the greater the risk of encountering trouble. The territory was not safe for a woman traveling alone with a white man, regardless of the history between them. As they continued their journey, the landscape began to change around them. The harsh desert gave way to higher country, where pine forests clung to the slopes of mountains that had stood since the world was young. This was the borderland between Apache territory and the settlements pushing ever westward, a place where cultures collided and old ways struggled to survive against the tide of change. Kaya knew every trail and water source, every place of shelter, and every zone of danger. This knowledge had been passed down through generations, a living inheritance more valuable than gold or silver. She had taught much of it to Nantan already, preparing him for a future that grew more uncertain with the territory. The reservation where they now lived was a fraction of what they had once called home, but they had made the best of it, maintaining their traditions and their dignity in the face of systematic attempts to erase both. It was into this world that Caleb Thornton would now intrude, bringing with him all the complications and dangers that came from bridging two worlds that seemed determined to remain apart. Kaya did not know if she was doing the right thing by bringing him to meet his son. She only knew that Nantan deserved the truth, whatever consequences that truth might bring. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Kaya spotted a familiar landmark ahead and felt her heart quicken. They were getting closer to home, to the moment when past and present would finally collide. She wondered if Caleb was ready for what awaited him, then decided it did not matter. Ready or not, the time for reckoning had come. They made camp that night in a sheltered canyon where ancient rock walls rose on either side like the bones of sleeping giants. Kaya built a small fire, just enough to ward off the chill that descended once the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The flames cast dancing shadows across the stone, creating patterns that her grandmother had once told her were messages from the spirit world. Caleb sat across from her, his face half illuminated by the firelight. He had been quiet for hours, lost in thoughts she could only guess at. She wondered if he was preparing speeches in his mind, rehearsing explanations and apologies that he hoped would somehow make things right. If so, he was wasting his time. There were no words powerful enough to undo 7 years of absence. "Why did you come looking for me now?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. After all this time, what changed? Kaya considered the question carefully before answering. She had asked herself the same thing many times over the past weeks, ever since she had learned where he was and made the decision to seek him out. "Nantan is old enough now to start asking questions I cannot answer," she said finally. "He wants to know why he looks different from the other children, why his skin is lighter, and his eyes carry traces of a color that does not belong to our people. He wants to know where he came from, and I have run out of ways to avoid the truth." Caleb nodded slowly, as if this explanation made sense to him. "And you thought bringing me to him would give him those answers?" "I thought you had the right to face what you left behind," Kaya replied. "And I thought Nantan deserved to see his father with his own eyes, to form his own judgments about the man who gave him life." The fire crackled between them, sending sparks spiraling up toward the star-filled sky. Kaya remembered nights like this from their time together, when they would lie side by side and he would point out constellations, telling her the stories his mother had taught him about the shapes in the darkness. She had told him the Apache stories in return, and for a brief while, it had seemed like their two worlds might find a way to coexist. That illusion had shattered the morning she woke to find him gone, with nothing left behind but the silver medallion and a note she could not read because no one had ever taught her the white man's writing. She had kept that note for years, carrying it with her until a traveling missionary finally translated the words for her. By then, the message had become irrelevant. Just another broken promise from a man who had proven himself incapable of keeping his word. "What did the note say?" Caleb asked, as if reading her thoughts. "I always wondered if you understood what I was trying to tell you." Kaya reached into her pouch and withdrew the worn piece of paper she still carried, despite everything. She handed it across the fire to him, watching his face as he unfolded it, and read his own words from 7 years past. "I have to leave," he read aloud, his voice heavy with regret. "Men are coming who mean to kill me, and I cannot let them find you. Wait for me at the place where we first watched the sunrise together. I will come back for you before the first snow falls. I swear it on my mother's memory." The words hung in the air between them, and Kaya saw tears glistening in his eyes as he looked up from the paper. "You never came to that place," she said. "I waited there for 3 days, until the cold drove me back to my village. By then, I knew you were not coming." "I tried," Caleb said, his voice cracking. "I swear to you, I tried. But the men chasing me caught up with me near the border. They beat me and left me for dead in a ravine. By the time I recovered, months had passed. I thought you would have moved on, found someone else. I thought you would be better off forgetting I ever existed." Kaya felt something twist in her chest at his words, but she refused to let it soften her resolve. "So you decided for me," she said. "You decided what was best for me without ever asking what I wanted." You took away my choice, just like every white man who has ever come to this land and decided he knew better than the people who were already here." The accusation landed hard, and she watched him struggle to find a response. There was none, and they both knew it. Whatever his reasons, whatever circumstances had conspired to keep him away, the result was the same. She had been left alone to face the consequences of their love, while he had moved on to whatever life awaited him beyond the mountains. They sat in silence after that, the fire burning low between them as the night deepened around their small shelter. Kaya wrapped herself in her blanket and lay down with her back to him, signaling that there would be no more conversation tonight. She needed to rest, to gather her strength for what lay ahead. But sleep did not come easily. Her mind kept returning to the boy waiting for them at the end of this journey, the child who had inherited his father's curiosity and his mother's stubbornness. Nantan was the best of both of them, untainted by the mistakes and misunderstandings that had poisoned what his parents once shared. She prayed that meeting Caleb would not change that, would not introduce shadows into her son's bright spirit. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out beneath them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack, the sound echoing off the canyon walls like a lonely prayer. Kaya closed her eyes and listened, letting the familiar sounds of her homeland carry her toward an uneasy rest. Tomorrow they would cross into her people's territory, and everything would change. For better or worse, the collision she had set in motion would finally occur, and none of them would emerge from it unchanged. The morning brought clouds that hung low over the mountains, threatening rain that would turn the trails to mud and slow their progress. Kaya studied the sky with the practiced eye of someone who had spent her entire life reading the moods of the land, calculating how long they had before the weather turned against them. "We should move quickly," she said, breaking camp with efficient movements born of long experience. "There is a place ahead where we can shelter if the storm catches us, but we need to reach it before midday." Caleb followed her lead without argument, packing his gear and saddling his horse with the quiet competence of a man accustomed to life on the trail. Whatever else he might be, he was not soft or helpless. The years since their parting had clearly taught him how to survive in harsh country. As they rode, the landscape grew more familiar to Kaya with each passing mile. She recognized the twisted pine that marked the boundary of Chiricahua hunting grounds, the rock formation that her grandmother had called the Sleeping Bear. These landmarks were like old friends, welcoming her home after her journey into the white man's world. She thought about the life she had built in the years since Caleb's departure. It had not been easy, raising a mixed-blood child among people who had every reason to distrust anything connected to the white invaders. Some had whispered that she should have given the baby away, sent him to live among his father's people where his light skin would not mark him as an outsider. Others had suggested darker solutions that she refused to even consider. But Kaya's mother had stood by her, and her grandmother had declared that the child would be raised as Apache, regardless of who his father was. The blood of the people flowed through his veins, alongside whatever Caleb had contributed, and that was enough. Nantan had grown up learning the stories and ceremonies, the hunting skills, and the warrior's code that had defined their people for generations. He was Apache in his heart, even if his face told a more complicated story. Kaya had made sure of that, had fought to give him an identity that could not be taken away by the circumstances of his birth. Whatever happened when he met Caleb, that foundation would remain. No one could strip him of who he was. The first drops of rain began to fall as they reached the shelter Kaya had mentioned, a shallow cave carved into the hillside by centuries of wind and water. They led the horses inside and settled in to wait out the storm, watching sheets of rain sweep across the valley below, like curtains drawn by invisible hands. "Tell me about the men who were chasing you," Kaya said, breaking the silence that had become their default state. "Who were they, and why did they want you dead?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the rain beyond their shelter. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of memories he had clearly tried to bury. "I was a soldier once," he said. "Cavalry, stationed at Fort Apache during the campaigns against your people. I did things I'm not proud of, followed orders that should never have been given. When I finally refused to participate in a massacre of women and children, my commanding officer marked me as a deserter and a traitor. The revelation hit Kaya like a physical blow. She had always wondered what had brought him to her village that first day, what demons he had been fleeing when he stumbled into her life. Now she understood, and the knowledge changed everything she thought she knew about the man sitting beside her. "You were hunting my people," she said, her voice flat with the effort of containing her emotions. "Before you came to us, you were part of the army that has been trying to destroy us for generations." Caleb met her eyes without flinching, accepting the accusation without defense. "Yes," he said simply. "I was young and stupid and believed what they told me about savages and civilization. It took seeing the truth with my own eyes to understand how wrong I had been." Kaya thought about this, turning the information over in her mind like a stone examined from every angle. Part of her wanted to hate him for it, to add this sin to the list of grievances she had accumulated over the years. But another part recognized something important in his confession, a willingness to acknowledge wrongdoing that she had rarely seen in white men. "Is that why you stayed with us?" she asked. "Because you felt guilty about what you had done?" "At first, maybe," Caleb admitted. "But that changed. You changed it. The way you looked at me like I was a person instead of an enemy. The way you shared your stories and your laughter without demanding anything in return. You showed me that everything I had believed about your people was a lie." The rain continued to fall, filling the silence between them with its steady rhythm. Kaya remembered those early days when she had nursed him back to health and watched the haunted look in his eyes slowly begin to fade. She had thought she was saving him from whatever pursued of him. She had not realized she was also offering redemption for sins she knew nothing about. "Does Nantan know any of this?" Caleb asked. "Does he know his father was a soldier who fought against his mother's people?" "He knows his father was a man who made mistakes and tried to make amends," Kaya replied. "I never told him the details because I did not know them myself. Now that I do, I am not sure what to say." The storm raged on outside their shelter, but inside, something had shifted between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Kaya realized that the man she had hated for 7 years was more complicated than the simple villain she had constructed in her mind. That did not excuse what he had done, but it made it harder to maintain the pure, clean anger that had sustained her for so long. The storm passed by late afternoon, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under a sky scrubbed to brilliant blue. They emerged from the cave and continued their journey, picking their way carefully along trails made treacherous by the rain. The air smelled of wet sage and pine, familiar scents that told Kaya she was nearly home. As they descended into the valley where her people had made their settlement, she felt the familiar mix of comfort and sorrow that always accompanied her return. This place was beautiful, nestled between protective ridges with a creek running through its heart. But it was not the homeland her grandparents had known. That land had been taken, parceled out to ranchers and miners who had no understanding of what they were destroying. Her people had adapted, as they always did. They built their wickiups along the creek and planted small gardens in the cleared spaces between the trees. The children still learned the old ways, still heard the stories that connected them to their ancestors. But there was a sadness underlying everything now, an awareness that the world they had known was slipping away like water through cupped hands. Caleb seemed to sense the change in her mood as they rode. He stayed close but said nothing, perhaps understanding that words would be inadequate to address the grief she carried. Whatever his flaws, he had always possessed an instinct for knowing when silence was the kindest offering. They were spotted long before they reached the settlement. Kaya saw the scouts moving through the trees, recognizing their shapes even at a distance. Word would reach the village before they did, and she knew what kind of reception awaited them. Bringing a white man into their midst would raise questions and suspicions that she would have to answer. The first person to greet them was her cousin, Goyakla, a serious young man who had taken on responsibilities beyond his years since his father's death. He stood in the path with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable as he watched them approach. "Kaya," he said, using the Apache pronunciation of her name. "You return with a stranger. The elders will want to know why." "He is not a stranger," Kaya replied, bringing her horse to a stop before him. "He is the father of my son, come to meet the child he has never known." Goyakla's eyes shifted to Caleb, assessing him with the calculating gaze of a warrior evaluating a potential threat. "The father who abandoned you," he said. "The one you told us was dead." "I told you what I believed at the time," Kaya said carefully. "I have since learned that I was wrong. He lives, and Nantan deserves to know him." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kaya knew her cousin had never approved of her relationship with Caleb, had been among those who whispered that she should have sent the baby away. His acceptance now was crucial if this meeting was to proceed without violence. After a long moment, Goyakla stepped aside, though his expression remained cold. "The elders will decide if he may stay," he said. "Until then, he is your responsibility. If he causes trouble, you will both answer for it." Kaya nodded, accepting the terms. She had expected nothing less. Her people had suffered too much at the hands of white men to welcome one among them without caution. They continued into the settlement, and Kaya was acutely aware of the eyes following their progress. Women paused in their work to stare. Children stopped their games and watched with open curiosity. The whispers began almost immediately, spreading through the village like ripples on a pond. She led Caleb to the wickiup she shared with her mother and grandmother, gesturing for him to wait outside while she went in to prepare them for what was coming. Inside, she found her grandmother sitting by the small fire, her weathered hands busy with the beadwork that had occupied her final years. "Grandmother," Kaya said, kneeling beside the old woman, "I have brought someone who needs to meet Nantan." Her grandmother looked up, her eyes clouded with age but still sharp with intelligence. "The father," she said. "It was not a question. I saw it in the smoke this morning. The spirits told me he was coming." Kaya felt a chill run down her spine at the words. Her grandmother had always possessed abilities that defied explanation, a connection to the spirit world that had made her one of the most respected members of their community. If she had seen this coming, then perhaps it was meant to be. "Is Nantan ready for this?" Kaya asked. "Will it hurt him to learn the truth?" The old woman was silent for a long moment, her fingers continuing their intricate work even as her mind traveled elsewhere. "The boy has a strong spirit," she said finally. "He has survived much already. This will be another test, but he will not break." Kaya wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at her heart. She had spent 7 years protecting Nantan from the pain of abandonment, constructing a story about his father that preserved the boy's dignity while shielding him from the truth. Now she was about to tear down that careful construction and replace it with a reality far more complicated than any story she could have invented. Rising from her grandmother's side, Kaya took a deep breath and stepped back outside. Caleb stood where she had left him, looking uncomfortable under the weight of so many hostile stares. She almost felt sorry for him, this man who had once been her whole world and was now a stranger in a place where strangers were rarely welcome. "Come," she said. "My grandmother has agreed to let you stay, at least until the elders decide otherwise. But there is someone you need to meet first." She led him around the wickiup to a small clearing where a group of children were practicing with miniature bows, their arrows tipped with blunted points for safety. Among them was a boy who stood slightly apart from the others, his lighter skin and unusual features marking him as different even from a distance. "Nantan," Kaya called, and the boy turned at the sound of her voice. His face lit up with joy when he saw her, but then his gaze shifted to the stranger beside her, and something more complicated flickered in his expression. The boy approached slowly, his small bow still clutched in one hand. Kaya watched him study Caleb with an intensity that reminded her painfully of herself, that same careful assessment of a situation before committing to any course of action. At 7 years old, Nantan had already learned that the world required caution from those who looked like him. "Mother," he said, stopping a few feet away from them. "Who is this man? Why does everyone look at him like he is dangerous?" Kaya knelt down so she could meet her son's eyes directly, taking his free hand in hers. "This is something we need to discuss privately," she said. "Will you come with me to the creek? We can talk there." Nantan's gaze flickered between her face and Caleb's, and she could see the questions multiplying behind his eyes. But he nodded without argument, trusting her as he always had. He handed his bow to one of the other children and followed as she led the way toward the water, Caleb trailing behind them like a man walking to his own judgment. The creek was swollen from the recent rain, rushing over rocks with a music that had accompanied every important moment of Kaya's life. She had been baptized in these waters according to the old traditions. She had come here to weep when she realized Caleb was not coming back. She had brought Nantan here as an infant to introduce him to the spirits of the land. Now it would witness another pivotal moment in their intertwined lives. She sat down on a flat boulder by the water's edge and pulled Nantan onto her lap, wrapping her arms around him as if she could shield him from what was coming. Caleb remained standing a short distance away, clearly uncertain of his role in this conversation. "Do you remember the stories I told you about your father?" Kaya began, keeping her voice soft and steady. Nantan nodded against her chest. "You said he was a brave man who loved us very much, but he had to go away before I was born. You said he watches over me from the spirit world." The words were a knife in Kaya's heart, a reminder of the lies she had told to protect her son from a truth she thought would hurt him more. "I need to tell you something difficult," she said. "Something I should have told you long ago, but I was afraid." She felt Nantan tense in her arms, his small body bracing for whatever blow was coming. He was so young to have already learned that bracing instinct, that expectation of pain that came from growing up different in a world that punished difference. "Your father did not die," Kaya said, forcing the words out past the tightness in her throat. "He went away, and I did not know where he was or if he was alive. I told you the story I told you because I thought it would be easier than admitting I did not have answers to your questions." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the rush of water over stones. Kaya could feel her son processing this information, could almost hear the gears turning in his quick mind as he reassembled his understanding of the world. "Then where is he?" Nantan asked, his voice small but steady. "If he did not die, where did he go?" Kaya turned her son gently so he was facing Caleb, who stood frozen by the creek bank like a man confronting a ghost. "He is here," she said. "This man is your father. He has come to meet you." Nantan stared at Caleb for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Kaya watched her son's face for any sign of what he was feeling, but he had inherited her ability to mask his emotions when necessary. The boy who asked 1,000 questions about everything had suddenly gone silent. Then Nantan slid off her lap and walked slowly toward Caleb, stopping just out of arm's reach. He tilted his head back to look up at the tall man who had helped create him, studying the features that were echoed in his own face. "You have the same eyes as me," Nantan said finally. "The other children say my eyes are strange, but they look like yours." Caleb's voice was rough when he answered, thick with emotion he was clearly struggling to control. "They are your grandmother's eyes," he said. "My mother. She had eyes like the sky just before sunset, blue mixed with gray and sometimes green. She would have loved you very much." The mention of a grandmother seemed to shift something in Nantan's demeanor. He had grown up surrounded by his mother's family, but he had always known there was another side to his heritage that remained unexplored. The possibility of belonging to someone else, of having connections he had never imagined, was clearly intriguing to him. "Why did you leave?" Nantan asked, and the simple directness of the question cut through all the complicated adult emotions swirling around them. "Mother said you loved us. If you loved us, why did you go away?" Kaya watched Caleb struggle with how to answer, saw him reject several responses before finally settling on the truth. "I made a mistake," he said, lowering himself to one knee so he was closer to the boy's level. "I thought I was protecting your mother by leaving, but I was wrong. I should have stayed. I should have found a way to be here for both of you." Nantan considered this, his young face serious beyond his years. "Mother says that when we make mistakes, we have to try to fix them. She says that is how we become better people. Are you here to fix your mistake?" The question hung in the air, and Kaya realized she was holding her breath, waiting for the answer. Everything depended on what Caleb said next, on whether he could offer her son something real or just more pretty words that would crumble at the first test. "I am here because I want to know you," Caleb said slowly, choosing each word with care. "I cannot change what happened before. I cannot give you back the years we lost. But I can be here now, if you will let me. I can try to be the father I should have been from the beginning." Nantan was quiet for a long moment, and then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He stepped forward and placed his small hand on Caleb's weathered cheek, touching the face that was so like his own. The touch lasted only a moment, but it seemed to break something open in Caleb. Kaya watched tears spill down his weathered cheeks as he covered his son's small hand with his own, holding it against his face as if afraid the boy might disappear if he let go. Whatever walls he had built around his heart over the years crumbled in that instant, leaving him exposed and vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "Your hands are rough," Nantan observed, pulling back to examine his father's calloused palms. "Like the men who work with horses." "Do you work with horses?" Caleb laughed through his tears, a sound that held both joy and sorrow in equal measure. "I do," he said. "I have a small ranch about 4 days' ride from here. Just me and a few horses and some cattle. It gets lonely sometimes." "Mother says loneliness is the price we pay for pushing people away," Nantan said, with the devastating honesty of childhood. "She says that when we are lonely, we should look for ways to let people back in." Kaya felt her cheeks flush at hearing her own words reflected back through her son's voice. She had said those things during the long nights when Nantan asked why they lived apart from some of the other families, why certain people in the village looked at them differently. "Your mother is very wise," Caleb said, glancing at Kaya with an expression she could not quite read. "I should have listened to her wisdom a long time ago. Perhaps things would have been different." The three of them sat by the creek as the afternoon light began to fade, talking in the cautious way of people who are building something new from the ruins of something old. Nantan asked endless questions about Caleb's life, his ranch, his horses, the world beyond the mountains that the boy had never seen. Caleb answered each one patiently, painting pictures with words of a life that was both foreign and fascinating. Kaya listened more than she spoke, watching the connection form between father and son like a bridge being constructed across a chasm. It was tentative and fragile, this new thing growing between them, but it was real. She could see it in the way Nantan leaned toward Caleb as he spoke, in the way Caleb's eyes never left his son's face, drinking in every detail as if memorizing him. But the peace of the moment could not last forever. As the sun began to set, Goyekla appeared at the edge of the clearing, his expression grim. "The elders will see you now," he said to Kaya. "Both of you. They have questions that require answers." Kaya rose and brushed the dust from her dress, steeling herself for what was to come. The elders were the keepers of tradition, the voices of wisdom that guided their people through difficult times. They would not look kindly on a white man in their midst, regardless of his connection to one of their children. "Nantan, go to grandmother," Kaya said. "We will come for you when we are finished." The boy looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her tone must have warned him that this was not the time for questions. He nodded reluctantly and headed back toward the settlement, casting glances over his shoulder as he went. The council meeting was held in the largest wickiup, a structure reserved for gatherings of importance. Inside, 5 elders sat in a semicircle around a small fire, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. The oldest among them was a man named Dasodahe, whose name meant "he sits above," a title earned through decades of leadership and sacrifice. Kaya entered first, with Caleb following close behind. She could feel his nervousness radiating off him like heat from a stone, but he kept his composure, standing tall as he faced the judgment of men who had every reason to view him as an enemy. "You bring a white man among us," Dasodahe said, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. "A soldier who once hunted our people like animals. Tell us why we should not kill him where he stands." The words were harsh, but Kaya had expected nothing less. She drew herself up and met the elder's gaze without flinching. "He came because I asked him to come," she said. "He is the father of my son, and Nantan deserves to know the man whose blood runs in his veins." A murmur passed through the assembled elders, and Kaya saw them exchange glances that communicated volumes in the silent language of those who had led together for many years. Another elder, a woman named Lozen, who was known for her gift of prophecy, leaned forward to study Caleb with unsettling intensity. "I see blood on his hands," she said. "The blood of our brothers and sisters, spilled in the time before he found his way to our valley. But I also see something else, a turning, a change in his spirit that came from walking among us. He is not the same man who wore the blue coat." Caleb stepped forward, and Kaya tensed, unsure whether he was about to help or hurt their cause. "I will not deny what I did," he said, his voice steady despite the fear she knew he must be feeling. "I was a soldier, and I followed orders that brought death and suffering to innocent people. When I understood what I had become, I could not continue. I chose to be a deserter and a traitor rather than participate in another massacre." DeSoto Hay studied him with eyes that had seen generations come and go. "And you expect us to forgive you because you stopped killing us? You expect gratitude for choosing not to murder children?" "No," Caleb replied. "I expect nothing. I deserve nothing. I came here only because a woman I wronged many years ago gave me the chance to meet my son. Whatever you decide to do with me, I will accept. But I ask that you consider what is best for the boy, not what punishment is fitting for me." The elders conferred in low voices while Kaya and Caleb stood waiting, their fates hanging in the balance. Outside, the sounds of evening settled over the camp, the familiar rhythm of life continuing despite the drama unfolding within the council wickiup. Finally, DeSoto Hay raised his hand for silence and turned to face them once more. The firelight cast deep shadows across DeSoto Hay's weathered face as he delivered the council's judgment. "You may stay for 7 days," he said, his voice carrying the finality of a door closing. "During this time you will be watched. You will not carry weapons. You will not wander beyond the boundaries of our settlement without escort. If you violate these conditions, you will be killed." Caleb bowed his head in acceptance. "I understand," he said. "Thank you for your mercy." DeSoto Hay's expression hardened. "This is not mercy," he said. "This is practicality. The boy Nantan is one of us, regardless of who fathered him. He deserves the chance to know his own blood, even if that blood is tainted by the crimes of his ancestors. We do this for him, not for you." The dismissal was clear, and Kaya guided Caleb out of the council wickiup before he could say anything else that might jeopardize the fragile permission they had been granted. The night air was cool against her skin after the warmth of the fire, and she breathed deeply, trying to calm the racing of her heart. 7 days, Caleb said quietly as they walked toward her family's dwelling. "It is not much time. It is more than you had any right to expect," Kaya replied. "Use it wisely." The days that followed took on a rhythm of their own. Each morning, Caleb would wait outside the wickiup for Nantan to emerge, and together they would spend hours exploring the boundaries of their new relationship. Kaya watched from a distance as her son showed his father the places that mattered to him: the swimming hole where he had learned to dive, the tree he was determined to climb to the very top, the rock formation where he went to think when the world became too confusing. She watched Caleb listen to every word Nantan said with the focused attention of a man making up for lost time. He asked questions about the boy's life, his friends, his dreams for the future. He shared stories of his own childhood, carefully edited to remove the darkness that had shaped so much of his adult life. In those moments, Kaya could almost see the man she had fallen in love with, the gentle soul hiding beneath the scarred exterior. But not everyone in the settlement was pleased with the arrangement. Goyakla made his disapproval known through cold silences and pointed looks, and others followed his lead. Some of the women refused to speak to Kaya when she passed, turning their backs as if she had brought a plague into their midst. The children were forbidden from playing with Nantan while his father was present, leaving the boy isolated from his usual companions. On the 4th day, Kaya found her son sitting alone by the creek, tears streaming down his face. She sat beside him and pulled him into her arms, feeling his small body shake with sobs he had been holding back for too long. "They say I am not really Apache," Nantan whispered. "They say I am white man's son, and I do not belong here. Goyakla told the other children that my father is a murderer who killed our people. Is it true? Is that why everyone hates him?" Kaya felt her heart break at the pain in her son's voice. She had tried so hard to protect him from exactly this kind of cruelty, and now her own decision had brought it crashing down upon him. "Your father did bad things when he was young," she said carefully. "He was a soldier, and soldiers follow orders even when those orders are wrong. But he stopped following those orders. He chose to walk away from the killing rather than continue." Nantan looked up at her with eyes that held wisdom beyond his years. "Does that make it okay? Does stopping make the bad things go away?" "No," Kaya admitted. "Nothing can make the bad things go away. But we can choose what we do next. We can choose to be better than we were before. Your father made that choice, and he has lived with the weight of his past ever since." She held her son for a long time, letting him cry out the confusion and hurt that had been building inside him. When his tears finally subsided, she wiped his face and looked into his eyes with all the love she had carried for him since the moment she knew he was growing inside her. "You are Apache," she said firmly. "You are my son and your grandmother's great-grandson, and the blood of warriors flows through your veins. No one can take that from you, no matter what they say. Do you understand?" Nantan nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in his expression. "But I am also his son," he said, glancing toward the settlement where Caleb waited. "I am both things at once. How can I be both things?" It was a question Kaya had asked herself many times over the years, and she still did not have a satisfying answer. "You find a way," she said finally. "You take the best of both worlds and make something new, something that belongs only to you. It will not be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." That evening, she found Caleb sitting alone outside the wickiup, staring up at the stars with an expression of profound sadness. She sat down beside him without speaking, and for a while they simply shared the silence, two people bound together by a child and separated by everything else. "I am hurting him by being here," Caleb said at last. "I thought I was giving him something, but all I have done is make his life harder. Maybe I should leave before the 7 days are up." Kaya considered his words, weighing them against what she had seen developing between father and son. "You are not hurting him," she said. "The people who whisper and point, they are hurting him. You are giving him answers to questions he has carried his whole life. That has value, even if it comes with pain." Caleb turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, she could see the ghosts of the man he had been reflected in the man he had become. "I never stopped loving you," he said quietly. "All those years, all that distance, and I never stopped." Kaya felt something stir in her chest, an ember she had thought long dead, suddenly flickering back to life. She did not answer, because she did not trust her voice to speak the truth she was not ready to admit, even to herself. The 6th day brought trouble none of them had anticipated. Kaya was gathering water at the creek when she heard the shouts rising from the edge of the settlement, voices sharp with alarm and the unmistakable edge of fear. She dropped her clay pot and ran toward the commotion, her heart pounding with dread at what she might find. A group of riders had appeared on the ridge overlooking the valley, their silhouettes dark against the morning sky. Even at a distance, Kaya could see the glint of metal, the rifles held ready across saddles. These were not Apache, these were white men, and they had come with purpose. Goyakla was already organizing the warriors, positioning them behind cover as the riders began their descent into the valley. Women hurried children toward the safety of the wickiups, their movements quick and practiced from too many previous encounters with armed invaders. The settlement transformed in moments from a peaceful home into a defensive position, every adult knowing their role in the dance of survival. Kaya found Caleb standing at the edge of the clearing, his face pale as he watched the approaching riders. He turned to her with an expression that told her everything she needed to know before he spoke a single word. "I know those men," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "The one in front, riding the gray horse, that is Samuel Briggs. He was my commanding officer, the one who ordered the massacre I refused to participate in. He has been hunting me for 7 years. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Caleb's presence had not gone unnoticed. Someone in the settlement they had passed through, someone at the trading post, had recognized him and sent word. The men who had chased him all those years ago had finally found their quarry, and in doing so, they had found something far more valuable, an Apache settlement with minimal defenses. Kaya grabbed his arm with desperate strength. "You have to hide," she said. "If they find you here, they will have an excuse to attack. They will claim they were pursuing a deserter, and we were harboring him. Go to the caves beyond the North Ridge. Take Nantan with you." "I will not run and leave you to face them alone," Caleb protested. "If Briggs is here for me, then I should be the one to confront him and give him exactly what he wants." Kaya shook her head fiercely. "He does not care about justice. He cares about silencing the man who witnessed his crimes. If you show yourself, you give him permission to kill everyone here in the name of capturing a traitor." Before Caleb could argue further, Nantan appeared at their side, his young face tight with fear but his stance determined. "Mother, what is happening? Who are those men?" Kaya knelt and gripped her son's shoulders, pouring every ounce of love and urgency into her voice. "I need you to do something very important," she said. "I need you to take your father to the caves where grandmother showed you the old paintings. You remember the way?" Nantan nodded, his eyes wide. "Stay there until I come for you. Do not come out no matter what you hear. Do you understand?" "But mother," Nantan began, his voice trembling. Kaya silenced him with a look that brooked no argument, the same look she used when the stakes were too high for childish debate. "Go now," she commanded, and watched as her son took his father's hand and led him away from the settlement, 2 figures disappearing into the brush as the riders drew closer. The confrontation that followed was one Kaya would remember for the rest of her days. Samuel Briggs rode into the settlement like a conqueror claiming territory, his men spreading out behind him with weapons ready. He was a large man with a face that had gone soft from easy living, but his eyes were hard as flint, the eyes of someone who enjoyed the power he held over others. "We are looking for a deserter," Briggs announced, his voice carrying across the silent gathering of Apache who had assembled to face him. "A man named Caleb Thornton. We have reason to believe he passed through this area recently." DeSoto High stepped forward, his ancient frame somehow commanding despite the armed men surrounding him. "There is no one here by that name," he said. "You have been misinformed." Briggs smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "Is that so?" "Because I have witnesses who say otherwise. They say Thornton was traveling with an Apache woman heading in this direction." His eyes swept the crowd and landed on Kaya with unsettling precision. "A woman who matches your description quite closely." Kaya felt the weight of every gaze upon her, the unspoken accusation hanging in the air. She had brought this danger to her people, had led their enemy directly to their doorstep. Whatever happened next was her responsibility. "I traveled alone," she said, stepping forward to meet Briggs's stare without flinching. "I know nothing of the man you seek." The lie came easily, smoothly, because she had spent 7 years lying to protect her son and herself. One more deception was nothing compared to what was at stake. Briggs studied her for a long moment, and she could see him calculating, weighing his options. He did not believe her, that much was clear. But attacking an Apache settlement without provocation would bring consequences, even for a man with his connections. The peace between their peoples was fragile, maintained only by mutual exhaustion and the knowledge that further war would benefit no one. "We will search the area," Briggs said finally. "If we find evidence that you are harboring a fugitive, we will return with more men and the authority to take appropriate action." He leaned forward in his saddle, his voice dropping to a threat meant only for her ears. "And if I find out you have been lying to me, woman, you will regret it for whatever short time you have left." The riders departed as suddenly as they had arrived, heading toward the hills where their quarry had disappeared. Kaya watched them go with ice in her veins, knowing that the caves where she had sent Caleb and Nantan lay directly in their path. Kaya did not wait for permission. The moment Briggs and his men disappeared over the ridge, She grabbed a rifle from one of the warriors and set off at a run toward the caves, ignoring the shouts of protest that followed her. Every second that passed brought the hunters closer to her son, and no force on earth could have stopped her from reaching him first. She knew these hills better than any white man ever could, knew the shortcuts and hidden paths that generations of her people had used to move unseen through their homeland. She ran with the desperation of a mother whose child was in danger, her lungs burning and her legs aching, but her spirit refusing to yield. The cave entrance was hidden behind a fall of rock that looked impassable to anyone who did not know exactly where to step. Kaya scrambled up the tumbled boulders and squeezed through the narrow opening, calling out softly as she entered the darkness beyond. "Mother." Nantan's voice echoed from deeper within, and a moment later he emerged from the shadows with Caleb close behind. "They are coming," Kaya gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "The soldiers. They are searching the hills. We have to move." Caleb's face hardened with resolve. "No," he said, "no more running. I will not let them threaten my family any longer." Before Kaya could stop him, he pushed past her toward the cave entrance. She grabbed his arm, but he shook her off with surprising gentleness. "This is the only way," he said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that stopped her protests in her throat. "Briggs will not stop until he finds me. If I face him now, if I end this here, you and Nantan will be safe. Trust me." He pressed something into her hand, and she looked down to see the silver medallion, the proof that had brought them back together after so many years apart. "Give this to our son," Caleb said. "Tell him his father finally learned how to stay and fight for what matters." Then he was gone, climbing out of the cave and disappearing into the sunlight before she could find the words to call him back. Kaya stood frozen, the medallion cold against her palm, listening as his footsteps faded into silence. What followed came to her in fragments, sounds carried on the wind through the cave's narrow entrance. She heard voices, Caleb's steady baritone and Briggs's sharp commands. She heard the click of weapons being raised, the shuffle of boots on stone. She held Nantan against her chest and covered his ears, trying to shield him from whatever was about to happen. The gunshot, when it came, shattered the morning like glass breaking. Kaya felt her heart stop, felt the world tilt beneath her feet as she waited for the silence that would tell her Caleb was dead. But instead of silence, there came more sounds, shouts of confusion, the thunder of horses, and then a voice she recognized calling her name. She emerged from the cave to find chaos on the hillside below. Briggs lay motionless on the ground, a dark stain spreading beneath him. His men were in full retreat, pursued by Apache warriors who had followed Kaya's trail from the settlement. And standing in the middle of it all, somehow still alive, was Caleb, a smoking rifle in his hands, and an expression of stunned disbelief on his face. Later, she would learn what had happened. Caleb had confronted Briggs alone, offering to surrender in exchange for leaving the settlement in peace. But Briggs had never intended to accept any surrender. He had raised his pistol to execute the man he had hunted for 7 years, and in doing so, had given Caleb no choice but to defend himself. The Apache warriors had arrived just as the shot was fired, their presence enough to scatter Briggs's men and prevent the confrontation from escalating further. It was over, all of it, the years of running and hiding, the fear and the secrets. The man who had haunted Caleb's past lay dead on the hillside, and with him died the threat that had kept him from claiming the life he truly wanted. The days that followed were strange and tender, a time of healing and cautious hope. Caleb's actions had changed how the settlement viewed him. He had faced his enemy rather than hiding behind their protection, had been willing to sacrifice himself to keep them safe. It did not erase the past, but it opened a door that had previously seemed sealed forever. DeSoto High summoned them to the council wickiup on the evening before Caleb's 7 days would have ended. The elders sat in their familiar semicircle, but their expressions were different now, less hostile, more contemplative. "You have proven yourself in ways words could not," the old man said. "You stood against your own people to protect ours. This does not make you Apache, but it makes you something more than enemy." He paused, his ancient eyes moving between Caleb and Kaya and the boy who stood between them. "If you wish to stay, there is a place for you here, not as one of us, but as family to those who are. Kaya felt tears streaming down her face as the weight of 7 years finally lifted from her shoulders. She looked at Caleb, saw the same overwhelming emotion reflected in his eyes, and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Nantan reached up and took his father's hand, then his mother's, binding them together in a chain that felt unbreakable. "Does this mean we can be a family now?" he asked, his voice carrying the hope that only a child can truly embody. Caleb knelt and pulled his son into an embrace that included Kaya, the three of them holding each other as the fire crackled and the elders watched in approving silence. "We already are," he said. "We always were. It just took us a while to find our way back to each other." Outside the wickiup, the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, the same stars that had witnessed their first love and now blessed their reunion. The road ahead would not be easy. 2 worlds still collided around them, still demanded that they choose sides in conflicts not of their making. But they had something now that could not be taken away. A family forged in hardship and proven in fire, bound by a love that had survived abandonment and found its way home. The silver medallion hung around Nantan's neck now, proof of a bond that could never be denied, a promise that had finally been kept.